All right, so lesson 9 today, we're going to get started. Few things on tap for today. We didn't quite finish some of the stuff we were working on last week in terms of playing around with the grid views, adding additional functionality like sorting, paging, etc. We had almost finished that, but there were a little bit of functionality we want to add on to that. So we'll pick up where we left off last week. We'll add that functionality. Then we're going to do some more work with related data. I'll show you sort of where we're going. So this was the app we had running last week. So we did paging where we could change the number of pages and move between them. We also enabled sorting. So one thing we need to do is we need to add some kind of indicator. There's no indicator either which column we're sorting on and in which direction. So we should probably add an icon. We want it to look more like this when we're doing sorting. And we want to have either an ascending arrow or descending arrow in the appropriate column. So that'll be the first thing we'll do today, is we'll add this to the courses grid we were working with last week. We'll get that functionality working. Then the next thing we'll want to do is this piece. So when we go in and pick a student, right now our student form has this section. If I go in and edit a student, it's got this section, but it doesn't show what courses they're enrolled in. We also can't give them a grade. So we're going to add this functionality. When we load a student, not only will it show what courses they're in, we can remove them from a course, we could also put a student into another course, and we'll look at here how we can use .NET to fill cascading drop downs. So if I pick math, the courses filter only for math, and then I can add to that grid and it'll repopulate. Okay, so we're going to add all of this functionality today into our working application, and then I'm going to give you a lab. Okay, to work on some of this stuff, give you a chance to practice some of this stuff on your own. Okay, so that's where we're going today. So I think the first thing we will want to do is open up our solution from last week. You can either keep working on it. I'm going to export it as a template, and then I'll make a new lesson 9 solution, and I'll use the lesson 8 as a template. So either open up your solution from last week. If you weren't here, you can grab my solution from GitHub. Again, if you grab mine from GitHub, you will have to put your own credentials back in the web.config file, because it's got my database credentials without my password in there. So once you have the solution open, as I said, you can either work with it, or you can just click on the file menu and export last week's as a template. So I'm just going to create a template from my lesson 8, and I'll make a brand new solution for today. So I'm going to make a new project for today, and I'll just use my lesson 8 project as my template. I'll dump it in a new lesson 9 folder for today. Again, if you grab the solution off Git, you'll need to put your credentials into web.config and then get your solution for today launched in the browser. Be an exact replica of where we left off last week. So really it's the same solution last week. So the functionality that we added, that we could go in and do paging on our courses, and we could do sorting. All of this stuff is enabled. No, last week was lesson 8. Lesson 6 was before reading week. So the first thing we want to do with this page is add the column sorting arrows so we can see not only what column are we sorting by, but which direction. So we want to add last week, if I go into my project directory, we cloned it from last week. So last week near the start of class, actually we don't have it. I thought we did have those images. Bear with me for a second. Okay, so I've put a couple files. I think I put them on Blackboard. I'll just double check they're in the lesson 8 folder. I'll copy them to the lesson 9 folder. So if you haven't logged into Blackboard yet today, please log in. Yeah, I will just... I guess we never got to this point last week, so I didn't have you download these files. So if you go into the lesson 9 folder, down at the bottom, there's a link that will now say Gridview Images. If you're already in that folder, you'll just have to refresh it. So this just contains 2 little arrows, a down arrow and an up arrow. So download that zip file. And I'm going to save that inside of my new lesson 9 solution. In here, I'm going to create a subfolder called Images. So just save that zip file. There's just 2 little JPEGs in there. And then you can just extract those 2 files. I'm not sure if I put them in a folder. I'll just extract them here. I put them in a second folder. So there's an ASC.jpg and a DESC.jpg. So I just want those to go in a folder called Images. And then I can get rid of those. So inside of my project directory, I have an Images folder, and inside the Images folder, I have those 2 JPEG files.
I can't find my file.
If you can't find your file, just grab the file off GitHub. You should be posting your files to your GitHub at the end of every class, and that way you'll always know where they are.
I always move them into my folder before I leave class, and I didn't. I don't know why.
Well, the benefit of putting them on GitHub is you can get them from any computer, right? You don't even have to be on, you don't have to be on campus to get them.
Once you download it from GitHub,
You could work on that, that's fine, yep, if you want. No, it won't make a difference. So inside the project directory, you now have an images folder with those 2 JPEGs. So rather than us walk through all the code line by line, here's what I want you to do, okay? We want to enable this kind of functionality where it will show, so there's that's obviously the ascending image, and that would be the descending image. So I've given you some of the code on Blackboard. So here's what you need to do. You're going to need to create a new event handler on the, so you have to go to your courses.aspx. And on your grid, you're going to need another event handler. We already have events for row deleting, for page index changing and sorting. You're going to need another row handler. And I want you to see if you can figure which row handler, which event you want to generate. We need to generate here. Okay. And then I've given you a good chunk of the code. So the event name is here. This is what you can use Visual Studio to generate. And then every place, so basically I want you to copy this whole section into your code behind page. And you can work together on this. This is not a test. I'm not marking you. Everywhere you see something in blue and in square brackets, you've got to replace the square brackets and the blue text with some code. So here would be the name of the event. You'll have a constant, object, variable, etc. So when you're completed this, if you do it correctly, it'll mean that when you sort on the courses, it'll add either that ascending or descending arrow to the appropriate column. That's what all that code is going to do. Okay, so you can work through it together and see if you can get this functionality running. We'll go over it together in a little while, but I'll give you some time to kick it around together. Okay, so take what I've given you and see if you can fill it out. Okay, any questions or everybody clear? Sorry. So this button here that says show all files, now it shows everything in the project directory. So if you just right click the images folder and say include in project, then Visual Studio will recognize those paths. It will still work even if you don't do that. I tend not to put my images folder in because often that folder is really big. So it doesn't matter. If you want the paths, then that's how you do it. And then when you're done, you can just toggle that off. And I think you might have to build, once you include it, you may have to build compile the solution for it to be recognized, the paths to be recognized. So what we're checking on each row is whether the row is of type, what would that be then?
Better.
Right. Okay, because we're really only interested in the header in this case, because we want to know where does that stupid little triangle go, and which triangle should it be. So row data bound is the event. Okay, I think we should, in the interest of time, go through this. From walking around, it looks like a lot of you got close. So the first thing is we need to code the row data bound event. As Brandon said. So when each row is connected to our data set, so I'll just create the new event. So I will grab that code off Blackboard, and I better change students to courses.
Did you grab as many brackets as you
Yes, I did. Thank you.
No worries. Can I see if you know this
So we only need to check this on is post-back, because the sorting event is a post-back event. The row data bound will fire when our grid first loads, but we don't want any of this code to run. That we should have no arrows when the user first loads the courses page. So I better change these two to courses. So that'll be the first change. So what needs to go here? There's a bunch of constants. Visual Studio will bring up the different types of rows. So here are my 6 options. So which type of row are we concerned with here if the user's clicked on a column for sorting? Yeah, we want the header row, right? So if it's not the header row, we're not going to do anything. We're only going to put that up or down arrow into the header. So we are creating a new image. I'm just giving it a variable name, calling it sort image. So what data type should this be? Kyle, I'll ask you because you, I think, saw it. Okay. Yep, that's right. So we're just creating a new image.
Oh, I didn't take the square brackets.
Yeah, all those square brackets come out. Those weren't supposed to be arrays or anything. Those were just the delimiters around
That's where.
my code prompts. So wherever you see square brackets, with the exception of this one, all these others, the square brackets come out. So now what do we need here? What session variable do we need to interpret?
Circle.
Yeah, so we created a session variable last week that we called sort column. We defaulted it to the course ID, and every time in our sorting event, every time our sorting event runs, right, we change the session sort column value to be equal to whatever column the user clicked on. So basically, if we're in the header row, we're going to loop through each column and figure out, is the current column the one that we want to sort by, yes or no? So if our direction is descending, what's the name of the image file we want to set for our sort image?
Up and down
Yeah, so we'll pick our descending arrow, and we can give it an alternate of sort. We'll just say sort descending as the alt.
Where's the session sort column?
Okay. So when the page first loads, if it hasn't been posted back, so you just click the courses link, we're defaulting the value to course ID. And then when the user clicks any column heading and it triggers the sorting event, we're repopulating it from the default of course ID using this e.sort expression. So that will tell us what column the user just clicked on. So after that happens, Hayden, to go through the process, we then call our get method. So that requeries the database, but now we're using the current sort column. So let's say they click last name. Sorry, well, in this case, they click department name. So now we're sorting by the department name. And when we call data bind, this data bind method then one row at a time invokes the row data bound. So that's the process, that's the sequence of events. Sorting calls our get method. Our get method orders by the proper column. To the query, it calls data bind, and then this runs one row at a time, starting with the header row.
Second, I'm not sure if you said this, but the second, wouldn't that need to be changed to a second sort correction?
Here?
No, the next one, it's just the name of the variable.
Yes, it should be. Thank you.
It keeps trying to say default connection 1 instead of default connection 2.
Well, then do a find and replace in your code for any instances of default connection 1 and just change them to default connection. can do a global find and replace. Thank you for pointing that out, Brandon. Yeah, in my example, I'd used dir, but in our code, we used sort direction.
All right. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so we'll want to change that variable. And obviously, if we were showing the descending JPEG in the first condition, the opposite would be the ascending JPEG. And then inside of the current column, what object do we need to add in? Yeah, you got it, Connor. So we'll add in our sort image. So we're creating a new image object. We're determining whether that image should render the descending or the ascending JPEG, and then we add that object into the current cell at the top. So now we'll run through it and see how it works. So when courses first loads, it's simply sorted by ID, that's our default. There's no arrow showing up. If I want to choose any other, I now get, it's probably easier to see if I expand it to 10. So we can go Z to A on department, whoops, and A to Z. Sort down or up on any column, which is the result we want, right? This is what users would be expecting to see. We've all done this from an end user perspective. We get a grid. We can see that these are titles, so we should be able to click on them. So the row data bound event would also be the event where we could add any other conditional logic in our grid. Let's say, for example, we had some condition that would determine that maybe some courses couldn't be edited or deleted. So we might want to hide or disable one of these links based on some condition. If that was the case, in our row data bound, we could evaluate the value, we could evaluate some condition, we could find our edit link or our delete link, and we could hide it or disable it or change the text, for example. If I think all the way back to the first day, I probably showed you this. This is an example of where we would do it. Just see a course. Let's see. Oh, these are too old. Let's see. See if I can actually find one. Sorry, I don't have an active one here I could show you, unfortunately. Actually, hang on, maybe I can find one. Probably can, they probably just haven't updated their site. I think this is just dummy data. So notice here this link says register in the grid view, but these courses fill up, they have a capacity. So when on the row data bound event of this grid, we're actually checking whether the course is filled to capacity. If it's filled to capacity, we change that link to say waiting list instead of register. So that happens inside of that row data bound event. Does anybody have any questions about the code here that we've used for doing the sorting? Yep, all that does is put in that little image. There's other ways you can do it. You could create two classes in your CSS file that had that as an image, as a background image, and you could add that class onto the table cell. That's another way of doing it. This way is probably a little bit easier. They really should have built this into the grid. They've built so much other functionality into the grid view. I don't know why they didn't automatically build in the arrows into the sorting event. Would have
Provided two images.
Yeah, would have made sense that they just had default images that come along with it. I would hope at some point they might enable that.
Is sort expression the thing that adds the functionality of sorting?
Sort expression, let's run it through the debugger. Sort expression will tell you the name. So here's our, so we've provided a sort expression for each column.
Okay.
So we've provided the value, which matches the name of the column in the database. So then we can pass that value into our query. So if I run it with the debugger, so Richard, when I click any column, so if I click department,
You get an error.
so it says the sort expression is the department name,
Okay.
okay? So when I call get courses, we run our query, it gets everything in memory, so we have all the courses in memory now, they're not sorted, but now we're applying, so that sort expression gets added into our variable, we're storing it in the session, and now when we set the data source, we call order by that column.
Okay, I see.
So sort expression is a built-in property of the ASP grid view. That's not a variable, we didn't create it, it's built right into the grid view functionality. Okay. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
You fix this.
Yes, I can have a look. Any other questions about the code? No. Okay, so this is a good place for us to take a pause. When we come back, we will have a look at this functionality. So adding related data into our student page.
20-minute break in this class.
Sorry?
Do we have a 20-minute break in this class or 10?
Well, I mean, you take a 20-minute break each time. Officially, it's 10 because I think I asked you guys on the first day.
I thought we said 20.